I'm just going to start talking. You guys can keep moving and get back to your seats as you're able. Thank you for coming back from the break so quickly. I'm Anna with CAPSAW, and I am thrilled to introduce our next speakers, Chris and Avi. I suspect they look somewhat similar to you, or they were, I can't talk, I'm going to start that over. You guys have seen them before. They were here in October at our last housing conference, and I don't know that they ever really left the region. We have been working really hard with them to learn and to plan, and as we just learned, we have a lot of hard work ahead of us. And so with that, I will let them explain to you what those next steps might look like. Thank you.
So again, it is great. It is great. There we go. It's great to be back with you all less than a year later, and it's great to see the same level of engagement and traction wanting to engage around this really significant issue. So one way to describe what you all are trying to do in your region, it's a complex adaptive system, meaning linear solutions won't work. You need systemic, broad-scale different solutions. And the work that Jonathan and Mel did is a wonderful, wonderful foundation upon which to base your work. Everything that they have outlined and shared there is great fodder to continue the work and continue to build and grow. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now, to start this, though, I want to start out with a story. So in 1911, there were two expeditions that launched for the South Pole at the same time. Two launched, and they were on competition in a race to get there. Roald Amundsen and Robert Falcon Scott. Now, I'll give spoiler alert. One expedition ended tragically with all members dying. One got there with plenty of food and plenty of resources and plenty of time. So what's the difference? Why am I telling you about this? It's a concept called the 20-mile march. So Scott, his expedition, they decided, you know what, we're just going to go and we're going to work hard. And when we feel good, we're going to go 100 miles or 25, 30, 40 miles in a day. When we don't feel good, if the weather's bad outside, we're just going to camp out and wait. That was their approach. And that was the team that all the team perished 11 miles from the next supply drop, or the final supply drop to get to where they needed to go. Now, Roald Amundsen had a different approach, a more disciplined approach. They went 20 miles or 20-ish miles every day. Whether there's a blizzard outside, they went 20 miles. Whether they were feeling great, everything's wonderful, they went 20 miles. They were 45 miles from their final destination. And the crew wanted to go. The crew wanted to continue going, but Amundsen said, no, we're just going to keep our disciplined approach. And they made it early with plenty of resources. The reason I'm telling you that is because you all are on a 20-mile march. You're on a long journey. And oftentimes in these stories, we get really excited about this next, oh, I can't wait, we've got this data, we've got this energy, let's go. And then it gets hard. The blizzard shows up. The hunger pangs get there. We're like, oh, we're going to take a break for a little bit. Oh, we got all this energy, let's go. And when these fits and bursts, they peter out after a while. The 20-mile march, that consistent, disciplined approach, is what you all are on and have been doing since last October and even before last October. Consistently meeting, consistently saying, what can we learn? What can we do? What can we learn? What can we do? So all of that is culminating in this next step. We've learned a lot. Now, what can we do? And that's where we're going next. What are the next steps on this? How do we address this as a community? Because many of you might be like, wow, I see it. I see the solutions. What's next? So next is, I'm going to skip some of these. We don't need these. We're helping you all create a collaborative approach to dealing with this. And so we're doing this because we're allowing resources and labor and responsibilities to be shared. It's not any one organization's responsibility, it's all organizations' responsibility to do this work. And as you are coming together to do this, there needs to be some coordination, because all of you could say, wow, we're really inspired, and each organization goes off to do its own thing. And well, that's great, but we can go further together if we all combine our resources together. And so we're helping you all to craft and create a model to help you get there to do this work. And so what that model looks like, it's 4 tiers on this 20-mile march that you're doing. So the first tier is that on the far right, annually, Annually, you're having some gathering together to say, where are we on the map? What does the data look like? What's been going on? What do we know? What are we learning? And also sharing and engaging in information and hearing stories like Sherry's story and understanding what is the landscape. Then there's a quarterly group that's meeting to saying, okay, we've heard these ideas, we've heard these solutions, let's make sure that we're going in the right direction. They're doing some coordinating work as a consortium. Then from there, and this is the next step that's being created, being kind of laid out here, is creating working groups. These are the groups that are actually taking action. That first step, we're just informing and engaging. It's for anybody and everybody to come and understand what the landscape is and to be engaged in that way. The next step is to start to kind of map out and scale out the action. But then this third bucket, the blue bucket, the working groups, is action and decision, meeting regularly. We've got monthly on there. Who knows how often the working groups will decide to meet, but they're meeting consistently and regularly to address the strategies and the programs and projects to move things forward. And then lastly, there's this coordinating backbone organization, or backbone group, I should say, that is making sure that the working groups have everything they need, that the consortium is able to get together, and that the summits happen. So you notice on the bottom, low engagement to high engagement. On the far right, engagement, show up, learn, the commitment level is very low. All the way to the far left, high engagement, commitment level is very high and activity is very high and engagement is very high. So that's the structure that you all are forming and working on. So what does the backbone organization look like? Well, so here are the 5 groups that are participating in the backbone organization. They're showing up to give resources, to give leadership, to give thought work, to kind of, and again, they're not up on high dictating what happens. They're kind of, think of it like if you've ever tried to herd sheepdog, right? Just keeping everything moving in the right direction, right? And that's really what it is. It's coordinating, keeping everything moving in the right direction. So these are your 5 groups that are participating in that work. And what is their role? Well, they're helping to coordinate working groups. As the working groups get stood up, and you'll hear more about those, as we stand up as working groups, helping them make sure they have the resources and the support they need to do the work, doing data collection, and making sure that they have the information and analysis they need, like that one idea about going back and looking and seeing what are in localities' budgets for revitalization of housing. What does that look like? What are the assets and the capacities in the region? So doing all that work. They're giving oversight and coordination and shared measurement practices, again, to make sure that we're all measuring the same thing. We'll make sure we're not just doing touchdowns, or someone's doing field goals and someone's doing baskets and someone's doing hockey goals. No, we're all using the same metric for measurements so we all have a shared win. So keeping that shared vision in front of us. Helping out with community engagement. Again, this is not intended to be something from on high that's pushed down. It's intended to be grassroots, community-driven, participatory, because we as the community are working together collaboratively to help this happen. And then helping to communicate, to not just do the work, to make sure people know what work is happening and how they can participate and be a part of that, how they can engage, making sure that communication is happening between the working groups, between those 4 kind of pillars there, but also with the community at large. Because as Jonathan said, there are lots of misinformation out there, lots of myths out there. How do we replace that bad information with better and good information? So making sure that communication is happening. And then they're also mobilizing and analyzing funding, helping to make sure that the work is being funded and making sure that we are having access to resources. So I'm going to turn it over to Avi to talk about our consortium engagement.
Thanks, Chris. So the African proverb says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. So, hopefully today, what you see in this collaborative model is an option to go together. As Chris described this model, it's one that is about collectivism, about coming together, about working together. All of these challenges, these housing challenges that we've heard from Jonathan and Mel, you can address them as an individual, certainly, as an individual organization, as an individual person. But we believe there's a great opportunity in being collaborative and identifying resources within each other that allows us to produce the greatest impact. And so as you think about, as we talk about this process, and many of you have been part of the summit, and Chris just described this backbone that is going to be supporting this collaborative model work. The consortium aspect of this is this idea that and we're working a little backwards here because we're going to talk about the working groups in a moment, but this is a place for the working groups to really come together and begin to share like what is happening amongst and within your group. What is the result of the work you've done over the last quarter? You know, if that's the rhythm in which you work. How is there overlap in the work that is happening within these working groups? So the consortium aspect of this is that there are updates that are going to be happening from each working group. It'll be a space of collaborative opportunity where these opportunities can be identified and lifted up and raised and discussed as one collective. And so back to these working groups, and this is a big reason why we're here today, and hopefully you can see yourself in this space. The working groups are really about orienting for specific challenges across the region. I love how Jonathan talked about regionally how the study focused on strategic priorities, easy wins, and then that background work. I was just, in my seat all giddy, imagining how this would work for the collaborative model. And so, just thinking about, how you see yourself as it relates to the study, data, and then how you might plug in, how your organization might plug in into this collaborative model to begin to identify those strategic priorities across the region, to begin to discuss what are the easy wins? What are the places that are primed for us to push into, that are ready for us to see and experience success in as it relates to housing? And then, what is that background work? What are those easy things that set the foundation for larger things to come in our future? And so that's really the work of the working group, is to come together on a specific topic and really engage in work. I mean, putting the rubber to the road, if you will. And so as we think about these working group definitions, I was also excited to see that many of the challenges that were raised and lifted up, and some of the direct priorities that were lifted up in Jonathan and Mel's presentation, lined up really well with how we've identified here today the working groups. And so the working groups are defined as housing stock, rental specific, housing stock ownership specific, housing stability, and then self-sufficiency. And so housing stock rental really focuses on how do we increase rental opportunities in properties? Is it conversations with landlords? Is it developing and building more and smaller units that really address many of the things that Mel talked about earlier today? Then housing stock ownership, again, this is housing solutions for everyone. And so some people, being in a rental property is the right answer for them in that time, in that moment. For others, there is a home ownership aspect and opportunity. And so we're looking for this group to really grow those opportunities of home ownership. Where are those spaces where we can, address some of the vacant homes, the homes that, need work. How can they be repurposed to create a home for a family in the SAW region? And then we'll look at housing stability. This is more of a short-term piece. This is more about point-in-time need. What we do understand is that many of our families have those point-in-time need. They experience homelessness, maybe loss of a job, and that quickly they're out of their home. How do we begin to address that to get them back on their feet, to stand them up again so they can be positioned to take opportunities to begin to look at housing again? I mean, I understand that in that situation, sometimes even housing is not the immediate priority. You're just trying to survive. And so how do we find ourselves in a position where that point in time need, those families can be supported, that we create stability for them, that they can begin to look forward again. Okay. And then finally, self-sufficiency. We get into home ownership, and I believe that one of Jonathan's slides addressed this, like counseling services. And so this idea of, yes, it is beautiful and wonderful to be in a home, but then how do we support the long term? That people stay in their home. They don't just get into a home, but we support them in a way that they're able to stay in their home. And counseling services, as was mentioned, could be one of those solutions. All right. And so from that, we hope that with the backbone that we're able to supply specific tools and support for you. There's training to ensure that there's a level of consistency across the working groups, that you're approaching the working group in a way that is consistent across each of them, that you also have some autonomy and flexibility to work within the framework to address your specific goal area. So if you're working within home ownership or self-sufficiency, that you have the tools and the flexibility to work as a group to begin to develop solutions. There will be admin support. So when we talk about coordinating spaces like this beautiful one here or others for your small group, that you'll be supported by the backbone in that way. Also connecting people to participate. So not only this room, there are many people in the SAW region who are concerned about housing. So who are those other folks that can tie into a working group? It may not be you, or you may be interested in self-sufficiency, but you know someone who is interested in home ownership. Bring those people along. That's what we're hoping for, and that the admin support can help you to do that. And then there's this resource support, and we talked about that, right? Going together, that we're looking across the region-wide, that we're identifying resources and we're finding ways as working groups to work together. And that's, again, the purpose of that consortium, that we all come together, we hear the progress that's being made, the challenges, the barriers that have come up, and how can we share resources that get us across the finish line. And then ultimately, communication support. So there will be lots of communication coming from the backbone about where we're meeting, what's happening. There'll be updates, hopefully, in our progress, in our process, that there are notes coming out of your working groups that the backbone is able to share into the full body of the group and with the community. We're seeking opportunities, not just to hold this to ourselves, but so that the full community is aware of the work that's happening within our working groups, and that ultimately we're able to share that back through, via email, maybe phone calls, more coffee conversations, lunch and learns, and then ultimately the summit that happens annually. So I'm going to pass over to Chris to close us out.
Thanks, Avi. And so with these 4 working groups, what the design is the information that Mel and Jonathan shared with us, that all lines up with these 4 buckets. And the thought is that these 4 buckets, these 4 working groups would start to pick actual specific things to tackle in the region. And notice we said region. There's some locality specific things, and there's partnerships that are happening, but we really want this to be, again, a regional approach to how to do this. And so what is happening is people are invited to be a part of this work, to jump in and do this. Now, what we recognize is maybe not everybody's ready to be part of a working group. Maybe just coming to the lunching and learns and growing and learning, that's the way to do it. Maybe coming to the summit just to get an update every year so you can have the good and right information to share with people. Maybe that's your level of commitment. So what we're asking and inviting people to do is on your table in front of you, in the center of the table, there is a handout, and Dan's going to hand me one so I can have it in front of you. We're asking you to make a commitment. Now, some of you heard that word commitment. You're like, no! I'm not asking you to pull out your checkbook. I'm asking you to make it, but here's the thing. Not all commitments are the same, and not all people are ready to make the same level of commitment. So what we're inviting you to do is to consider one of 4 commitments. The first commitment is kind of low entry, low engagements. Basically, I'll take responsibility for knowing and communicating about the facts in our region. I'm going to take the information that Mel gave. I'm going to make sure that data, that accurate commitment that accurate information is out there, that the accurate story gets told. So I'm just committed to being that. And when I'm at a barbecue and people start talking about affordable housing and the NIMBY starts to rise, and I hear those myths, I'm just going to start to share some facts. I'm going to drop some truth bombs on them, some facts. And again, not in a judgmental or harsh way, but just like, actually, that's not true. Did you know that actually this is the truth of the situation? Because I've got the data. So I'm committed to doing that. So would you be committed to doing that? The second way you can commit is I will attend conversations of housing, and I'm going to invite my peers and my friends and my colleagues to come. So those lunch and learns that are going on, that's an easy way to say, hey, I'm going to have lunch at this place, and there's some really cool people there. We're going to talk about housing. Would you like to come with me? It's you're just inviting somebody to lunch that happens to be about housing, right? Everybody needs to eat lunch. So that's a second commitment. I'm just inviting people to be engaged in the conversation. All right, that's the second level of commitment. The third level of commitment is to say, you know what? I actually am ready either because of what my organization does or what my passion is or where I'm feeling like really like I want to be invested in this. I am willing to join and be part of a working group that's going to show up and work consistently to tackle some of those strategies that Jonathan laid out for us, to tackle some of those things and actually take action on them. Recognizing this is a marathon and not a 5K. It's taking time and it's a long-term work. So I'm willing to commit to doing that work. Now, some of you might be like, Chris, I don't want to commit to any of those things, but I have this other idea I'm willing to commit to. We've got a space for you. Number four is you can say, well, you know what? I can't commit to those other things, but I can commit to this. I will be committed to this, and you can put that there. And we're inviting every person to just take a moment and say, what are you willing to be committed to in this conversation? You were willing to show up today to get some information. You're willing to test drive things to learn. Well, now is where the rubber hits the road, as Avi said. Now is where we're ready to start doing work, and we want you to be a part of the work. Again, we want to go together so we can go far, and we want to take that 20-mile march. So take a couple of minutes, fill that out, and we're not going to do an altar call or anything like that, but we are asking you to make a commitment to this work because it's your community. Your community is stronger when this work is done, and you all care and have some level of engagement. What are you willing to do for it? What are you willing to make a commitment for? All right, so take about 3 minutes. And as you're filling out that commitment form and taking a commitment, do you have questions of us or questions of the team that created this? Oh, and just as you're thinking about maybe questions you might have, I would like you to, like, once you fill it out, leave it at the center of your table and we'll come by and gather those. Just so that way we can have that and we can keep you, we can reach out to you and connect you if you want to be with a working group, that sort of thing. We are going to collect this. So just leave them at the center of your table. All right, questions, concerns, comments? I see a hand over here.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Brown with Augusta County Libraries, and I just have a quick question. So I also think in systems, so hi, I see you. First, my question is did you guys collaborate with the first group of speakers to determine what those themes were in order to determine the working groups? Or like, how did you go about determining what the working groups are? The reason I ask is because one of the areas that I personally have seen in the library are older folks especially, coming in saying that their houses need repairs. They don't have the funding for that. How do I find the funding and blah, blah, on all those things. And as somebody who weekly delivers books out to kids over the summer, I'm seeing that. So it's all being validated for me in so many different ways. So I don't see that aspect represented in the working groups. Do you see, am I missing something?
Can you go back to the working group? Yeah, great question. You are not missing anything, I don't think. So we did our work in parallel, I would say. So the things were happening at the same time. We did talk to Jonathan early on. So we had a group of folks that after the last summit, we formed a group of folks that started meeting in January. We met January, February, and I think April to kind of start to figure out what does this structure collaborative look like. And those 4 buckets are what came out. Those 4 buckets are pretty comprehensive. And so as Jonathan was laying out the strategies, I was actually writing them down saying, ooh, I would put this one here and I put this one there and I put this one there. And they actually aligned very nicely. So I think to what you're saying, the home repair and making sure the stock remains sustainable, to me, that's part of the I see that could fall in housing stability or even home ownership, depending on what the nature of the stock is. I could see it falling in there. In each group, self-sufficiency. Okay, thank you, Mel. So I think each of those groups are going to be taking what we saw from Jonathan and Mel and then applying it in their group, saying, here's what we're going to tackle or choose to tackle first. Because you know that very first slide that Jonathan showed, basically like viability, feasibility, and impact, looking at that Venn diagram to see where do all three come together, that's what we're going to tackle first. So great question. Thank you for that.
Hi, really great data program. I want to thank the city councils for being represented. I'm disappointed that there's no elected officials from Augusta County here. My question is, how are we coordinating housing stock and affordable housing with active transportation, biking and walking? You can't have one without the other. So how are we coordinating that?
That's a great question. And that's part of that complex adaptive systems piece. Everything interacts, all the parts interact together. So you've got transportation, medical, education. They're all part of being in this community, which is a complex system. And so I think that's part of the working groups to make sure they're thinking about all those things. So we're not designing solutions that fix something over here, but break something over there. And that's part of the work. And that's part of how we're going to be designing the work. So I'm an expressive extrovert. And anytime there's silence, I have to count in my head to like 30 because I'm like, let's talk, let's fill the silence. But I realize you actually think before you speak. So you're thinking before you want to say something. So, and the other thing I have too is if you know me long enough, you know I have this rule. If you've had a thought 3 times, it means it wants to come out. There's something inside you that needs to be asked. Now, that may not be appropriate to voice it in a forum like this. You can come talk to us afterwards. However, if there's a thought, you're like, ooh, should I ask that question? They might think I'm silly or stupid, or I don't want to come across as antagonistic. It's okay. This is a safe space. We're all friends here. Well, we want to capture for the video, so we're gonna bring you a mic.
Is it on?
It's on.
Quick question about the work groups. There may be a group that I don't want to be in for every part of it, but say you were focusing on reentry, I would like to be a part of that particular piece.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Great question. So right now, we're kind of asking people to be a part of something amorphous. Depending on what you work on, I might be interested, right? And so the working group, so in September, we're going to have kind of our formational meeting for the working groups where we're doing some training with them and making agreements of how they're going to work together and that sort of thing. Out of that will come the content of what they're going to work on. And so at that point, when you see the content, you're like, yes, I want to sign up for that. It's not like these are closed groups, like this is your only chance, act now. We've got time. So there will be opportunities to join, have on-ramps into the groups later on once the content is decided. It's a great question. Thank you. Right over here in the yellow shirt.
Thank you. Hi, it's Jeff Overholzer. So this is a big amorphous problem. Lots of factors bear on this. Lots of different constituencies have an interest and a stake in this. How do you measure progress? What are kind of the key metrics to look at to say we're making progress or not?
Great question. And so I think in Jonathan, when he was up there and he had that list, some of the solutions and strategies come with like this. If you do this thing, here's how you can track your progress and metric. And I don't know if Mel has some suggestions. I'm sure she's got lots of ideas about like, oh, you could measure this, you can measure that. I mean, you know, so what we want to stay away from is vanity metrics. Like, ooh, we did this, yay, but it actually had no impact, right? So we want to like kind of really know what are those active metrics that show us that we're actually winning the game as opposed to. And so that will be, I can't give you specific metrics right now because, well, the working groups haven't been formed, so I don't know what their work is to say what they're measuring to. But Mel, I see your hand go up, so I want to, yes.
I'm going to send Dan an article. It was either the New York Times or Washington Post recently did a great article on cities where their efforts in affordable housing are actually making a difference. And I want to point out that a lot of these places have been working on this for 20, 30, 40 years, but they're finally seeing in their market is starting to provide housing at lower income levels. You know, ideally what you want is to re-enable the market to provide the housing. And so, for example, Fairfax County, Tyson's Corner is one of those examples, you know, upheld with Minneapolis, you know, who has gotten rid of single family zoning, as they say, as a place that's finally gotten it. And we have observed over time, looking at the price of housing in the market as compared to incomes, that in Tyson's Corner, now the market is providing housing as low as 80% of AMI, which is a great win in a very high priced market. So I'll send that article to Dan and he can get it out to you guys, and you guys can see the ways that communities have actually sort of changed their market, changed the way things are going and how long it's taken them and that kind of thing. And it'll help you get an idea of like where you're headed. Because you're right, it is big and amorphous and there's tons of players and you have to tackle it from tons of different directions. And how do you know when you've gotten there? And so I think it'll help to have that.
Thank you, that's awesome. And the one thing I would say, you know, I keep saying the term complex adaptive system, but there's all these different parts and pieces playing together in a whole. Another part about complex adaptive systems is whenever you make a change, it takes time for the change to take effect. There's a lag time, and we have to give space for that. It's like when you're at home and you turn the hot water on, it doesn't come on right away, you have to wait for it. And because if you turn the water on, the hot water heater's broken, it didn't come on right away. Well, it takes time for the hot water to get there. Just as Mel said, it takes time for these solutions to take effect. So it's not like it's going to change tomorrow. We'll have some early wins and we'll see some successes like Sherry's and like others. We're going to see successes, but the actual change to the system, it's going to take time. And so we have to be committed to it over time, not just today and not just tomorrow. And so that's why these working groups are starting to form to work on concrete projects so we can see those wins, but it's going to be iterations and iterations and iterations. So I just want to name that reality. Okay. All right. So we are getting ready to land the plane 15 minutes early-ish. So we got, so please, if you haven't already, please make sure you're doing that commitment form to say how you're willing to commit to this work. And now we are going to hand it over to the PDC to wrap us up.